People always like to say that Christianity is a cope, that following God is basically just a way to like make yourself happier and try and feel better and live an easier life and kind of rub the genie in the bottle and get what you want. But if that's what Christianity is, then I'm doing pretty bad at it because there are a few things in my life harder than following God. Now, there's not really anything I'd rather do, but it doesn't feel good. It's not easy. It's certainly not a cope. Because when you wake up every day and you go to war with yourself, you literally have two parts of yourself that hate each other, fighting. Like you have your sinful side, but it is still you, fighting your godly side that is still you, clashing every single day. And you look in the mirror and you're like, dude, I'm evil. That does not feel good. That is not a cope. And I just wish the world would see it that way. That like I recognize that every second I'm not burning in hell, no matter what I'm facing. I am in an existence that I do not deserve. It is better than what I deserve. What I deserve is hell. So even if I'm being like tortured alive, for example, I'm not. But if I was, that would be better than what I deserve. I just wish the world would see it that way because the world lives very hedonistically. A lot of people live to feel good, to be happy, and those things are fine. I try to feel good and be happy, but that can't be the center of your life. Hedonism, or even like a dumbed down version of hedonism, that can't be it. That's very frivolous. Like which one sounds like the cope more? Recognizing God being there and he's the main character and I got to submit my life to him, or God's not real and out of all the billions of people that have ever existed, I'm actually the main character and I'm number one, and so I'm just going to do what feels good to me because all that matters is that I'm happy. Like which one of those sounds like the cope? Probably not the first one, right? I mean, I've for years of my life, obviously since being a Christian, but especially since I kind of locked in with God a few years ago, every hour of every day I face temptation, usually multiple times. Every hour of every day I face some sort of temptation, either outside of myself, like Satan, sending temptation my way, something I'm not trying to think of or do and it's there, or something within myself, a pattern I've built up, a sin that I might indulge in that then continues to fight me. I face temptation whether outside of myself or within myself so bad I gotta freaking step back and pray to God so that these things stop. Every hour of every day for years of my life. If that is a cope, if that is a way to make myself feel better, then again, I'm kind of doing a terrible job at it. The joy that Christians have is not in themselves, it's in God. When you recognize that you don't deserve anything God has given you, that brings you joy. Jesus Christ brings you joy, but you yourself, like you're gonna be disappointed with yourself every single day, and you still gotta love yourself, and you still gotta treat yourself like someone who can be redeemed because that's what God has done to you. But you gotta remember that like Christians don't get their joy from themselves, and they're not just so proud of themselves for being Christians. We could not do anything we do without God. We couldn't even know God unless God died for us first. So the joy that you get in being a Christian is in God, and the gratitude you have that you're not going to hell, even though that's all you deserve. That's what brings us joy. But our daily lives, struggling with sin, those aren't fun. It can be tempting to think that you're not a Christian because you struggle with sin, right? You have a sin pattern, whatever. It's rough, it's overbearing. You feel like you're not a Christian because you just sin over and over. And you remember that the fact that you're even worried about it is proof that you're a Christian, because the world doesn't even struggle. They just give in and they just live for sin. The fact that you're even thinking about that is evidence that you're saved, right? The Bible says the righteous man falls 7 times but gets up again. The world doesn't even care. They don't even try to get back up, right? But it really is a daily battle, and it's within yourself. It's not like a bad job where you're battling, you might be exhausted, it might be draining, but it's outside of yourself. It's not like the gym, which is, the same thing. It's tiring and it's very hard, very physical and mental, but it's still, it's not your soul. It can be a very spiritual thing, but not as much as literally like going to war with your flesh. That is genuinely 100% fighting you, the spirit and the flesh battling within you. And it can be very miserable and very tiring. And it's certainly not a thing that you can cope with and kind of feel better from. Not at all. It doesn't make you feel better. Oftentimes, the sins you give up, the things you're replaced with, that God gives you to sort of, the good versions to replace with, because sins are usually bad, sort of cheap, evil copies of what God makes. So like, for example, lust, sleeping around before marriage is a very cheap, evil copy of sleeping with your spouse. And obviously the benefit you get from sleeping around before marriage ultimately turns into bad things, and because it's evil, it's cheap, it can never live up to God's version, which is fulfilling. But while the person who slept around before waits for their time to come when they will have a spouse, it's not like the feeling of sleeping around will ever be replaced with anything that feels as good, because it's not supposed to. That is supposed to be a great feeling thing, and God doesn't promise you that you're going to just feel really great every time you deny your flesh. You're probably going to feel pretty terrible. The person that slept around and then stops is probably going to feel pretty freaking terrible until they get married, and they don't technically even know if they're going to get married, so there's not even like assurance there. Usually God takes bad things and turns them for good. That's what he does with our souls. And so when we mess up and sins and stuff, typically God is still able to bless us in those areas. He still works those things and doesn't allow our misuse of his gifts to stop us from ever having those gifts and using them for good. But you don't technically know. And so there can be a lot of this like fear of, you give up a sin, you stop a sin pattern, and then you don't know if that feeling's ever going to be replicated by the good version of it. Because God's not always going to fill that gap feeling wise. He will provide, but not always feelings. Like I don't feel my faith a lot. I don't feel close to God per se, emotional, whatever. Very often. I mean, sometimes I do. Sometimes I've had experiences where it's like God's sitting right there, like really awesome experiences. And then sometimes I just go months without feeling my faith at all. But I still got to honor God. Like I still got to do all the same things, whether I feel it or not. And that just goes completely against what I think a lot of people view religion as. And yes, we do have eternal hope that, someday these things will stop. These things will end. We'll never struggle with sin anymore. We'll never be sad again. We'll never hurt again. And we will feel perfect, but you don't know when that day is. And I would say most Christians would probably like to stick around for quite a bit. I know I would. And it's like, when's the day going to come that I don't have to fight myself? But then I realize not only do I love my life and want to keep living, even if that means the struggle exists, I'm the one who brings the struggle about. I'm the reason that I struggle with sin, because I've sinned before and I continue to sin, and those things continue to eat away at me. So how can I even ask God for an end to the sins that, I literally gave myself? He's already forgiven them. If I'm going to face backlash for the things that I've done, maybe that's just the natural consequence, and that's, again, not a fun, enjoyable, or soothing reality to live with, but I think it is the truth. I am not burning in hell, so facing some backlash for these sins is not even close to what I actually deserve from them. It's like Paul says in Romans when he says, like, I don't do what I want to do. I don't understand myself. He's talking about how he's like the worst sinner ever, and he does what he hates and he doesn't get it. That's literally what life as a Christian is like. You just do something awful, then you're like, God, what was I thinking? If I think about the sins I've committed, I mean, you name any sin pretty much, and I'm there. And I think about who I've been in the past, and it's like I can't even recognize how that's the same person. Like, how was I ever so stupid to love God and have a relationship with him, but still live as awfully as I did? I mean, I've had my struggles with so many sins, bro. Again, you name it, bro. Selfishness, pride, hatred, lust, unforgiveness, laziness. You can literally go down the list. I can put my name next to each and every one of those things. And those are all things that now I have to fight off. And then when I give into one of those things, I would say for the vast majority of those, it's not like it used to be. It's not near as much as it used to be, because I've grown in my relationship with God. I've given up lots of sins. I've given up lots of addictions and patterns. But that doesn't mean that here and there's not going to be tiny little versions of those that still pop into my mind, and I get the idea that somehow it's a good idea to go against God in the ways that he has helped me, the things he's freed me from. And then I realized very quickly, wow, I'm an idiot. Again, if all of this is a way to just cope and make yourself feel better, we have different definitions of that word. And Ecclesiastes really is like the nail in the coffin. It's like, yep, most of this stuff is meaningless. You're going to go to heaven and all these amazing things you have, like, it's not really going to matter. What's going to matter is that you honored God, and all the sins you committed, what did they get you? It was pointless. It was meaningless. You died and went to heaven, and your flesh died, and all the ways you made your flesh happy with sin, they don't matter. It's gone. Nobody's going to, I don't think you're even going to remember. Maybe I'm theologically wrong there, but I'm pretty sure, like, you're not going to remember everything from this earth. And I would imagine that includes the feeling of gratification you get from sin, which on earth obviously still brings about bad stuff and pain and bad feelings in the end. So it's not even worth it. It's meaningless. You won't even, have that with you forever. Why do you want it so much? Well, I've seen people put it this way, that your flesh doesn't go to heaven with you. So it's not worried about your soul. It's not worried about how good you are and how good you're doing in your faith. It just wants what it can get now because that's all it has. But you got to remember that your flesh is still a part of you. So it's literally you not worrying about and going against you eternally. It's such a sad dynamic. Why is human nature so unbelievably twisted, not just against God, but against ourselves? It's so complex and so advanced and so much not a cope to make yourself feel better when you start thinking about these things. But ultimately, there's no better way to live. Like, you don't live for feeling, you live for God. And you might feel good sometimes following God, and maybe you don't. And that's how it is, because you'll feel good forever, but you don't know when that day will come. And on that point with forever, like, I can attest that in my life, I don't want to live eternally. I don't. One of my greatest fears actually is eternal existence. I want to live a long time, like maybe a few million years. Like, that would be pretty awesome. But forever, like, that's not something I can comprehend. And that scares me. I've struggled with that for a long time. And I've had to come to the conclusion that, like, do I love God enough to live for him forever? Like, I don't think I'm an annihilationist. I don't really lean either way. For hell, it could be forever suffering. It could be temporary suffering and then no more existence. I can see how you can get either sort of interpretation from the verses people pull from. So I'm kind of in the middle there. I don't know exactly what I believe there. But just even considering annihilationism, I've kind of realized, like, okay, well, if it was true that you could literally become a non-believer, which I don't think you can. I'm a Christian. I don't believe I can be unsaved. But if I could, hypothetically, be unsaved, and then I don't go to hell, and I just hell is basically just not existence. And I don't have to live forever. One of my greatest fears is gone. Would I choose, if I could have the choice, to not live forever? Because I don't want to. If I had the choice to choose that, would I still choose to live for God eternally? Even though I don't want to live forever. I know I will when I get to heaven, but right now I don't want to. I don't understand it. Would I still choose to live forever for God? Even if, hypothetically, I didn't like it. I didn't want to live forever. I got to heaven and it made God really happy, but not me. Would I still choose to live forever for him? And I think the answer is yes. I think I really would choose to live forever, even if it meant that was just to make God happy and fulfill, his purpose for my life, which is me worshiping him, me having a relationship with him. If my existence is to please God, I think I would still choose to please God at the cost of me living a life forever I didn't want to live. Now, thankfully, that's not reality. I will want to live forever, and it will be freaking awesome. But I just have kind of realized the more I stop living for feeling and the more I start living for God, just how much I'm now willing to give up for him, even if hypothetically it doesn't mean anything necessarily good feeling or happy feeling for me in the end. And I think that's something a lot of people could learn, is that don't stop worrying about feeling. Again, nothing wrong with wanting to be happy and feel good. But I think even a lot of Christians put that at the center of their life, and they're afraid to go out and do mission work because it makes them uncomfortable, or they're afraid to give up that sin because they know they're still saved and it would hurt a lot to have to go without that sin. But you gotta give it to God, because that's what God calls you. He calls you to be obedient. He never says your life will be good feeling. He says you'll have happiness, but that might be joy through the suffering. That might be happiness in God, thankfulness to God, not specifically in how your current situation feels. And you just got to do it. And to the non-believers who may watch this video, I really do pray that you understand just how little of a cope Christianity is, and just how much Christians actually suffer and sacrifice every single day to an extent that is unlike anything else, where we're literally like, yep, I'm evil and God's good, and that's the only reason I have life. That's the only reason I have eternal life, because God's good even though I'm evil. When you recognize that about yourself, you have so much joy, not in yourself, a lot of misery in yourself. You have so much joy in God and thankfulness in God and what he's done. And it really clears up the purpose of life when you recognize, man, I suck, but God doesn't. So I'm going to worship the guy who doesn't suck, who's also kind of, all powerful, all knowing, perfect. There's some important attributes there too. But I just pray that, this would clear up some things For believers who are wondering why they may not feel good, sometimes you're not supposed to. Sometimes you're just supposed to honor God, and it doesn't feel good, and it's worth it because that's what he wants, and you'll be rewarded on the other side, even if you don't know what that looks like. And for the non-believer watching this, this is the Christian life. And as much as it sucks, it's also awesome. As much as it hurts, it is also good because it is objectively good to follow God. And I invite you into the suffering where you will have joy through the suffering and live a much more edifying life and be so thankful to God. And it's way better than anything that you could ever think of yourself. Trust me, I've tried. My ways are evil, and I promise you, apart from God, yours are as well. So you should repent and believe the gospel.